Hi, everyone. Um, just checking some of my technical things on this side. I apologize for the looping. I was away for a couple of days and I disconnected everything. So hopefully we're doing well tonight. Everybody can hear me. Thank you guys so much for joining. I can see Arnetta and Renee Michelle, and there's a Facebook user. And yes, we are on tonight. And tonight is going to be the prep for um, the most recent box that I released. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Maldonado, and I like to say I'm the owner, founder, and curator because I curated subscription boxes for Sew Your Bag. Hey, Nancy, I thought that was you. Wasn't quite sure. Sometimes it's Susan. So I'm not quite sure who it is, but it's either one of you, and I didn't want to get it wrong. But welcome. Yes, we are live tonight. As I mentioned, tonight we're going to be working on a tote. And the tote we will be working on will be this tote. And it is very big. We had a meeting in the group, and Nancy said, hey, it's a pretty big bag. And yes, it is. It's a pretty big bag. And I'm going to go through just to give you an idea of what the different parts are. This is part one. This is where I talk about preparing the material. I give a little bit of insight into the material that I'm using. Sometimes it is specific or new to some of the subscribers of the box. So tonight we will be going over a little bit about vinyl. We haven't really done vinyl in the box, and this was actually the last box of the year. So I thought maybe why not do some vinyl, and also pick some vinyl that's readily available to most people. So I didn't want to pick a vinyl and then you go out and you go, oh, I don't know if I can use that one. But I thought if I'd use one that is readily available to most people, either through ordering it online or locally, and I purchased the vinyl from Joann's, then you would be able to get it, try it out, see if you like working with vinyl if you've never done that before. There are vendors who do sell, or suppliers who do sell vinyl, different thicknesses. And I will talk a little bit about thickness. I will not necessarily steer you towards one supplier or another because I've tried it, right? I've tried so many different suppliers, and what works for me may not work for you. What I would recommend, and I'll get into this also a little bit more, is when you're looking at vinyl, maybe order a small cut or see if that supplier offers any kind of sample and test it on your machine. So we'll talk about also some of the requirements for sewing with vinyl as well. So when it comes to this bag, I also wanted to, along with using vinyl, I wanted to be able to use minimum amount of material. So it does use 1 yard of cotton and about a half a yard for the lining portion of it. So it's really a yard and a half of cotton. In the boxes, I give Ankara fabric, but any cotton fabric would be totally fine. And we're also going to talk about interfacing. So I will not be cutting out all of the pieces that is in the pattern itself. And yes, you can absolutely, that's a great question. I'm guessing it's still Nancy. You can absolutely substitute cork for vinyl. What I will say to you is that I interface my vinyl depending on the thickness. You don't have to, and depending on how comfortable you are, you don't have to. But with that being said, interfacing requires heat. And if you're using cork, I do not recommend at all using interfacing or applying heat to the cork. Use the cork as is. What you can do is firm up your lining if you wanted to give a little bit more stability because you don't believe that the cork is giving it enough stability. But put that on the lining side and not directly on the cork. There should be no heat applied to the cork. So that is a really, really good question. So I'm going to, tonight will be the preparation. Day two, and I was always saying, well, tomorrow night, but I may not come on tomorrow night, right? So day two will be day two will definitely go through how to construct the exterior of the bag. So I do the live videos over the course of 3 different parts, which is usually over the course of 3 different nights. And that gives people a chance to go back once they have the material, cut everything out, prepare it after I've explained it on day 1. And then day 2, you can then have just your exterior pieces and we can put that together. And then on day 3, what we do is we construct the lining and then we put the entire bag together on day 3. So I tried to break it into bite-sized pieces for everybody so that nobody feels as if, oh, I have to get this done tonight, right? The longest day I will tell you is usually day 3. And that's because there is more involved in the lining than there usually is involved in the exterior of the bag. But this bag is actually very simple. I considered the fact that there were holidays as well. So let me show you first what the bag looks like or what the pieces are, and then I'll lay it flat on the cutting mat for you so that then you can get a closer look at what it actually is close up. So the bag itself is, I mentioned it's cotton. So we're using cotton on the front and the sides. I'm sorry, on the front and back. On the sides and bottom, we're actually using the vinyl. So that's where we use vinyl. And that's where we take our first little, if you've never used vinyl before, this is a good bag, or any tote bag is a very good bag to start with because it's a very simple construction and your focus is trying to work with vinyl, not working with a complex pattern. So you can use it for complex patterns. I just say a simple tote is usually the best way to get you started. Hey, I'm not sure who Facebook user is number 2, but the first one was Nancy. So you have to give StreamYard access for me to see your name, or just tell me what your name is. So we'll use the vinyl on the side, like I mentioned here, and on the bottom. We also are going to do a double-sided strap where the bottom piece is also vinyl. When it comes to cotton, and I said it's about a yard of exterior cotton. I say a yard, but if you're somebody who's using directional fabric, please, please keep in mind that it may be a little bit more depending on how much direction it has, right? So if you need something to face up like a person's face, you then have to cut your fabric different, which may mean that you may use a yard and a quarter or a yard and a half. So we use it there on the front and the back. We're also going to use it on the zipper closure piece. And I'm in this pattern, I'm showing you a different way to do this, to do a zipper closure. There are so many ways. And so throughout the course of the various patterns I've done, I've shown different ways to attach a zipper closure to a bag. In this case, I'm showing you a different technique for the zipper closure, which also results in a very nice, clean technique. Thank you so much, Nova. So inside the bag, and I have something stuffed in there. Inside the bag, and like I said, this one was simple. I thought of the holidays. You will have just a corresponding or a contrasting or whatever lining you want. And that will also be in cotton. So this was a half a yard of cotton that I was mentioning that you would need in addition to your primary fabric. I've also used my exterior fabric to line this pocket here that we're going to create. So that's actually a pocket. It may not look like it, but it is a pocket that we're going to create. And when I open it, this is actually the exterior fabric. So I'm using up, like I said, a yard of that exterior fabric. And then I'm going to tilt this way. And you can see I've also used that exterior fabric on the bottom of the bag. All right. So the bag looks very firm, but it doesn't really use any any stabilizer. So it's not using foam. It's not using Decoville Heavy, Decoville Light, for those of you who know it. It's just using a firm stabilizer. So I sell stabilizer interfacing, which is DLH 2010. One day I'll give you the history of it, but it is a firmer stabilizer. It is a little bit lighter. It's a woven interface. So if anybody knows, for example, SF 101, which a lot of people know because it's available Hobby Lobby, Joann's, and things like that. It's that stabilizer, but like doubled. So it's very firm. Hey, Miss Varna. Yay, you're alive. I'm glad to hear it, Varna. I'm glad to hear it. And I appreciate you coming. I know what you're going through. So I am sending prayers for you, and I appreciate that you were able to join tonight. So that's this bag. One thing also I want to mention, and I will go to my cutting mat and show you, is that throughout the sew along, I do switch my cameras. So you will see me at the beginning, you'll see me at the end because I'm kind of camera shy, believe it or not. But while we're sewing or cutting or talking about things, I will flip between my cutting surface or my cutting mat and my sewing machine because I want to make sure that you see everything that I'm doing and you don't think that I'm doing one of the reasons I do live is because I want you to see I make mistakes and not everything works out perfectly. And so we work around it, we get through it, and we end up with a beautiful bag that's totally usable. So if the camera switching bothers you, I wanted to let you know straight up that that happens. It happens a lot during the sewing and showing you what I've done kind of thing. But when you see it happen, that would happen. So if you want to take a break and step away, you can absolutely do that and then come back. So let me switch to my cutting mat and we can then just very quickly review this. Susan here. Hey, Susan. Thank you for dropping it by and say hi. Um, yeah, so I know. So this is Susan. And I mentioned earlier, so this is Susan here. So if it says Facebook user, that's why people are introducing themselves, is because I don't know who the person is. They have to give StreamYard permission. But if you tell me who you are, I will more or less know. I appreciate that you were able to show up, Susan, tonight as well. Um, I know like this will be on replay, so I will say that right away. It will be on replay. It will be on YouTube. It will be in the Facebook group. So you can go back and look at it. If you want access to the Facebook group, which is sewyourbag.com, which a couple of people have asked for, I ask that you answer all the questions or else I will decline your request. And that is because I want to make sure that everybody understands first and foremost, be kind to people. Not everybody is at the same level, but everybody in the group is willing to share and pitch in and help you out. So answer the questions and then I can let you in. And it is Sew Your Bag on Facebook if you're interested. So here goes the bag, close up of the bag. This is the zipper closure, and the zipper does sit up. I purposely did it that way. You can, if you wanted to, push it down this way. If you want to carry it with it pushed down, just push it down. But I purposely constructed it with it sitting up. This bag uses minimum hardware. So you notice on the inside when I showed you before, the pocket, I did that because I didn't want any zippers or anything. I wanted to make it an easy peasy bag. And then on the opposite side, which is over here, there is nothing. So it's also highly, highly customizable. Thank you so much, Zena. Thank you so much, Zena, for joining. I appreciate the fact that you joined live. There are other lives out there if you want to see them. So I know sometimes lives are kind of hard because you're asking questions and nobody's answering. And that's because I'm no longer live. But they are out there. If there are other patterns that you purchase from me, the lives are out there for those patterns as well. So I appreciate that you were able to catch me tonight and you were able to join me as we start preparing the bag. So the hardware requirements are a zipper and purse feet. That's absolutely it. There's nothing else when it comes to hardware. Keeping the bag simple. Interface is just a heavy, I'm saying DHL 2010 heavy, which is a firmer interfacing. There's just a zipper for the hardware. And I use zipper by the yard. And we'll talk about that when I install the zipper. And there were some purse feet. And that's absolutely what I used. In the bottom, I think I will say to you, I did forget that in the bottom, there is a piece of Decoville heavy, but you can always double up. I see my cat scratching my bag. You can always double up on the interfacing if you want to make it firmer. And other things about, the bottom of the bag is if you wanted to at any point at the 99-cent store, they have those little cutting mat things. So you can definitely, if you wanted to, put a piece of that cutting mat in here in the place of the Decoville. So that's really, really what the bag is and what it looks like. I've tried to cover everything. I'm just taking another look at it, but hopefully that gave you a close up. This is the strap, and I mentioned it is double-sided vinyl. I will be cutting the top, which is the fabric, slightly smaller because I want to see that accent of that vinyl that I put on there. The other thing is if you make the bag and you have a rivet press or you know how to use rivets, you can use rivets to put down the straps. I did not use any rivets because once again, I wanted to make it as beginner friendly as possible, where the focus is using vinyl. So for these attached down, I just did a box going around, and then I did a little X in the box to attach the straps. So I did that to both of them. You can absolutely use 2 rivets if you want to on here to attach the straps. Something else that I'll show you, which is something I like to do because I don't always my teaching style is that if you have the tools to do it, that's great. But when you're first starting out, you don't always have all the things. So, but I try to give you ways that you can make your bag still look finished and polished. So for the strap portion of it, and I'll try to bend it here, I actually fold under in right into the vinyl. I fold under this piece that's coming over the top so that the ends look finished. I'm also going to fold under the ends of my vinyl. So this part of the bag looks finished and there are no raw edges. So that's just something I do. Yeah, Nancy, I knew you'd use rivets. I knew you'd use them. That's a so Nancy says she used rivets. So that just goes to show you how customizable the bag is. So if you have something, you know how to do a technique, like applying rivets and things like that, you can definitely do it. This bag, if you're comfortable, if you're somebody who's used vinyl before and you're comfortable using vinyl, you can definitely make the whole bag in vinyl as well. You can or cannot interface the bag if you want to. If you decide, I don't want to interface my vinyl because you know how to use it and it's too thick, leave the interfacing off. If you want to use waterproof canvas and you know how to use that, you can absolutely use waterproof canvas on the inside instead of the cotton, which is what I used. So once again, this bag is meant to be a bag that's simple enough, customizable enough, and you can very easily find the supplies. That's really what the focus was. And it's a quick bag that you should be able to, if you want to sew during the holiday season and you just want to, just tune out a little bit. It's one of those bags that you can do that with. Um, if you want to also, when it comes to customizing, if you want, you can leave off this zipper closure here. And if you're somebody who knows how to install magnets, you can actually put a magnetic closure here instead of a zipper closure. So, and then just leave the bag open. Because I know some people, when they use a tote, they just put things in it, but nothing that they're concerned about when it comes to security, right? So, for example, if you're somebody who uses your tote and you maybe go to the gym and you put, your gym shoes in here and a towel, you don't necessarily need a zipper closure. I mean, I know gym shoes are expensive, but you don't necessarily need that. So you can make the bag without the zipper closure, right? You could just leave it as an open tote that you use to go back and forth to the gym, as an example. So all of the techniques I'm showing you are transferable to any bag. So if you want to use this strap on another pattern you have, you can definitely use this strap technique. You can use the zipper closure technique on any bag. When I show you how to install the purse feet at the bottom of the bag, if you have purse feet, you can put them on any bag that you have, right? So it's about teaching you skills and techniques. So let's get started with this. And like I said, tonight I'm gonna do a little bit of prep. I'm gonna talk about the pieces a little bit more, and then I'm going to leave you to go offline, cut your pieces. And then for day 2, which will be tomorrow at 7, we're going to construct this exterior piece. So I've pre-cut some of the pieces. So I've pre-cut, for example, my strap pieces. So this is one of my straps, and this will be the bottom piece of my strap. And I have my little top pieces of the strap. Okay, so this will overlay on these, and we will do some folding on that. Okay. There will be a front and a back, which I mentioned before. So this is the fabric I'm using. I will be using different fabric than the one that I showed you, which everybody else who got the kit received. which is the one that I did on the bag. And that's just I used to make it the same thing, but switching it up a little bit, I'm going to use this fabric and I'm going to use this vinyl. Okay. Um, you will cut the lining pieces also according to the pattern, very minimal pieces to cut. And they are measurements, there aren't pieces. So just if anybody wants to know, they're actually measurements. So you have to measure the pieces and cut them. This piece here is going to be at the bottom of my bag. These pieces are going to be the sides of my bag. I have my zipper with my zipper pull, and we're going to talk about how we finish that. And then I have my little tab piece here for the end of my zipper. And then you should also have your pieces for your lining. Okay. Let's talk about this vinyl a little bit. And I'm going to use the strap as an example. So vinyl, and this one, as I mentioned, comes from Joann. Vinyl comes in different thicknesses and different backings. So this particular vinyl that I'm using, which comes from Joann's, has a fabric type of backing to it. So you can see that it has this fabric type of backing. And then this piece, which I didn't get from Joann's, has a fleece type of backing. You'll also notice that the backing is the same color as the vinyl itself. So when you're looking at vinyl, think about the fact that how you're going to use it. If there's going to be any raw edges, try to get something that where the backing is the same color if you're going to have raw edges. This one happens to be thinner than this one. And I don't know if I can show you because this one's black. But I'll try to show you at the camera. This one is thinner. See how thin that is? And see how thick this one is. So they're two different thicknesses, okay? This one also, I'll try to show you. I don't know if you can see it. It has a stretch. Oh, you can see it has a stretch like fabric. Watch. See how that stretches? So that's something else you want to be aware of when you're selecting vinyl, whether or not it has a stretch. One of the reasons or the key reason that I interface is to help minimize or reduce or eliminate that stretch. So look at your fabric and look at your vinyl and determine whether or not you feel you need to interface it because you're trying to get rid of the stretch. Stretching can distort your vinyl when you sew it. So that's why I try to eliminate it and I make it more like a piece of fabric than an actual, so that I don't have that stretch. This vinyl also has a stretch. It's very hard to see. Let's see if I turn it to the front if it's easier. But it does have a stretch to it. And it's kind of hard to see. I do cut this vinyl along the way that the material backing is. So that it actually goes down like this. So I try to cut it that way so that then I know which way the stretch is going and it's going this way from selvage to selvage, not crossway. You can cut it crossway if you're trying to minimize the stretch, but usually this vinyl comes about 59 long. So I try to maximize it, which is why I cut it with the actual grain of the material. Also, the rotary cutter goes a lot smoother because I'm going with the grain. So that's just something to be aware of when you're selecting your vinyl. Something else you should be aware of, and this is where I was trying to, once again, create more experiences when using vinyl as opposed to cotton, is when you use cotton, you tend to use the same foot, right? So you may use an edge foot, you may use a, you know, a 1/4 of an inch foot, 3/4 of an inch foot, a ditch foot. In this case, I'm glad you like it, Zena. I'm glad you're enjoying the tips. I try to give a little bit more than just, hey, sew a bag, but I'm glad you're enjoying it and I'm glad that you're getting something out of it. So when it comes to vinyl as well, unlike cotton, so a regular foot just is usually like a metal foot, right? It's just a foot sort of like this. This is my 1/8 foot, all right? So it's a metal foot. You may have a 3/8 inch foot, depending on your sewing machine. My default on mine is a 1/4 of an inch. So, and they're these metal feet. When you're using vinyl, usually, and this is just me, other people may feel differently about this. So I recommend that you use a Teflon foot. And those usually look something like this. So this one happens to be green. This one happens to be blue, right? But what it has down here is it's very slippery and slick. So it does not grab and pull your vinyl, and therefore it helps your stitches to be more uniform. Also, when you're sewing, you should take your time. So I tend to like more or less rip through things, so I'll go really quick. But if you want nice even stitches, get a nice speed going and maintain that speed throughout, and your stitches will be nice. But I recommend, a Teflon foot, and they're readily available for your machine. I sew during the sew alongs. Sew on a Juki. I have to look TL 2010Q. I do have a semi-industrial machine as well, but because my focus is helping people become bag makers, I stay with a machine that's more on the truly domestic end than it is on an industrial end, right? Because when you're first learning, you may not buy. I didn't. I had a brother sewing machine gifted to me, an expensive machine, and I want to give you bags that you can sew on like a Walmart machine if you wanted to. Okay, so I recommend the Teflon foot. And that's just so this isn't pull and it's nice and smooth. These are very inexpensive to purchase. Um, Also, something that I don't use. I'll tell you, I don't use this. I use a Teflon foot, but the walking foot is also very good because what it does is it actually walks, right? So when you're sewing, it actually goes and pulls the fabric back. So your regular foot here, your feed dogs move, but your top doesn't move. So it's dragging on that foot. The walking foot does exactly that. It walks, right? So it really goes this way, right? So it comes up, down, and pulls, up, down, and pulls. So the walking foot itself will help glide your vinyl through. The reason that I don't use a walking foot is because it has, there's a certain width. And sometimes if I'm putting in something, for example, a zipper, it can only get but so close to my zipper, and it keeps me sometimes a little bit too far. Whereas if I purchase a Teflon foot, they come in different widths. So there's a quarter of an inch, an eighth of an inch. And so you can use those when you're sewing on vinyl for something like a zipper. So if you need to get close, the walking foot, it's just one distance away. That's it. So if you need to get closer, you're in trouble. This is also very good when you want to do edge stitching, right? When you're looking at Teflon feet also, this one actually has an edge to it. I don't know if you can see that. So this one I can use when I'm edge stitching, and I can make sure that my stitches stay nice and neat along the edge. If I'm sewing on vinyl, it's not only Teflon, but it's an edge foot. It's very similar to the ditch foot that you may have on your regular sewing machine, where it has that little thing, and people use it when they're doing things like stitching in the ditch. You're also using it when you're trying to quilt something. You may use that edge as well. So they come in 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, and they have that little edge on it. I don't know if you can see that little edge that comes on right there. And this one doesn't. This one's just a regular one. So that's the difference if you actually see it and say, what's that thing hanging out? So that's the difference. But I recommend a Teflon foot. You may see me get reckless. I'm going to tell you right now when I sew the straps, and you may see me not use a Teflon foot. Don't panic. I can be reckless from time to time. It's not something that I would recommend for you to do if you're first starting out. Absolutely use a Teflon foot. By the way, you can use your Teflon foot as well on cotton. So you don't, it's not just for vinyl. So if you forget it on your machine, you're not going to break anything. Just, use it on there. The other thing I want to mention about vinyl itself is that it is thicker than cotton. So there could be areas of your vinyl where it is thick. So if you look at, and I can show you that, look at how I bend that, right? See how thick that is? If I take this piece of cotton and I fold it, we all know how thin cotton is, right? Even with interfacing, it's relatively thin. So most machines come with what's known as a hump jumper. It's meant to help you jump over the hump. It's also used a lot when people make blue jeans. I can never find mine. I'm going to be honest with you. So what I do is I will take a scrap piece of vinyl or canvas, and when I get to a thicker part, I will just roll this up like this, stick it under my presser foot in the back like that. And then when I sew, it helps me get over the hump. So you may see me do that as well. I'm mentioning that early on, but for the most part, I'm usually pretty good. But if you ever get to a point that you're thick, don't fight. Use something like this or your hump jumper, which what it does is when you're foot sits on top of it, it helps to level it out. So imagine that I'm coming here. You see how my foot tilts up there? It's tilting. By putting a hump jumper behind it, it levels the foot. So it's totally flat, and therefore it makes it easy to go over that thickness. So that's why we put the hump jumper, or I use a piece of material like a canvas or a vinyl right behind my foot to help level it off in the front so it can get over the thick part that I'm sewing. So that's just another tip for you. You shouldn't have that problem with this project, but I'm mentioning it too because if you continue to work with vinyl, these are the things that you may find happen. So that's the pieces. Let's talk about interfacing, and I can show you the interfacing that I use. It was very nice. I still have it in the package. Okay, so this is the interfacing that I use. It's DLH 2010, and I do have that on my website. So, I feel like I'm popping popcorn over here, the sound of this. This is, and it's hard to see, but it is it is stiffer than regular. I don't know if you can see how crisp that is. So it's almost like oak tag. If anybody knows like those file folder oak tags, it's like that, a little bit thinner than that. And then once you stick it on the back of the material, it will then fuse and it gives a nice stiffness, which is why, oops, when you look at the bag, it stood up by itself. I didn't really do anything to it, right? It stood up by itself. I used it in both the front, the lining, and the vinyl pieces. So, and I like my, I just threw my bag, by the way. I like my totes to be relaxed looking. I'm not, like I use it. It's a tote, put potato salad in it, whatever. And I like that. So I'm gonna fuse this on here. What I will say to you also that I do is I block fuse. There are people who actually will interface and they cut the pieces out. So for example, if they're interfacing a strap, they will cut the interfacing out like this for the strap, and then they'll lay the interfacing on it. They'll do the same for every single piece. I don't do that. I block fuse. So I personally have found there's not any more waste with interfacing, whether you block fuse or you cut it. It's the same amount of waste that you're going to use. And honestly, it's neater when you block fuse, first of all. And you probably end up with bigger pieces that you can reuse. So scrap pieces that you can use. When you cut this out, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I cut it? What do I do? The other thing about block fusing is, especially when using cotton, if you don't pre-wash it, which I do not pre-wash any of my things. I'm not wearing it. It's a bag. If it was a garment, I would suggest pre-washing, but it's a bag. I don't pre-wash, but there can be shrinkage because you're using steam. So if you pre-cut your interfacing, sometimes when you fuse it down, this shrinks, and then you still have to go back and clean up the edges, right? Because if the cotton shrinks when you're doing it and you made your interfacing bigger, you then have to go back and cut off that extra piece of interfacing. So when I block fuse, what happens is it shrinks, and then I just cut it one time, right? Instead of cutting it twice, cutting it before and then trimming it up later. So interfacing, very easy. I'm going to use spray, but you can use steam. I'm going to mist it with a watering thing here because the steam kills my cameras. So I'm going to take a bigger piece. I'll take my front piece or back piece or whatever, and I'll do a piece of vinyl as well so you can see, that it doesn't matter. Lay your fabric wrong side up. So the wrong side is facing up. Before we get to this, I want to mention to you, these are cut in rectangular pieces. So these are rectangular pieces for the front and back. Please just make sure when you're sewing it, and it's not as important, interfacing it at this point, but when you're sewing it, make sure that the direction of your print is facing up. So you should mark the top and the bottom. And I normally do that if on the back side of my piece, I will mark T for top. And that way I know when I'm laying it down that that's the top of my fabric. But I do it after the interface because the interface is white and you can write on it. So here goes what I do to block fuse. I just take one piece I take this big piece, and it's actually a yard of interfacing here. I lay it right on top here. I use steam, but I'm gonna just spritz some water on here. I then place it. Now, there is a difference between pressing and ironing. Okay, so pressing means you put the iron on it, you let it sit, you lift it up, you move it to another part, you let it sit. That's that's pressing. To me, that's pressing. Somebody may say something different. Ironing is when you move it back and forth like this. So you're ironing. Okay. So you will see a lot of interfacing, say, press something in place or iron it in place. Really, what you should do is press it, not iron it. When you iron it, it stretches the cotton that's underneath and it distorts it. So if you've ever done a piece, it's Varna. Miss Varna she loves a walking foot. Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with that walking foot. I really do. But it's very good for vinyl, especially. It's very good for vinyl and thicker fabric. So anything that's thicker, it's very, very good for. So when it comes to interfacing, what I was saying is that you should press it, because I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you have a big piece of fabric and you go down and you go on it and you iron it, like you move the ironing back and forth, when you turn it over, you can see that your fabric, your cotton has gotten distorted, right? And that's usually because when people iron, they push down and they pull or they drag. And so when you do that, it distorts it. And then you have to try to square up or true up your fabric again because you've distorted it because you were doing this the whole time, right? And if you're heavy handed, you were more than likely doing this and pulling your fabric or pushing your fabric. So that's why I always say press, don't iron, right? So that means you're going to put it in one spot and turn on my iron, because that usually helps when it's on. Cotton setting I use cotton setting for everything, which is very bad. But cotton setting. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press. I'm just going to put it there, let it adhere, put it here, let it adhere, and do that. Yes, this takes time to do it. You can also use a steam press. Some people actually have a presser because they may make t-shirts or things like that. I have a steam press, and it was like a Sunbeam one that I bought on Amazon. As much as I like it, it just takes up room. But you can use that, or you can use a regular presser. I'm sure you can also, if you have a Cricut and you have the Cricut pressers, you can use that as well to do this. What I will say to you is, if you're using any type of presser that has two metal plates, right? So there's a plate on the top that gets hot and a plate at the bottom that gets hot. Don't use vinyl in that press, okay? Because vinyl itself, or waterproof canvas, which you don't put interface on anyway, vinyl itself will melt. So the heat from the plate will melt your vinyl, and this will stick to your plate. So if you need to interface any vinyl, always use an iron to do that. Don't use any kind of presser. The other thing too is I find is if you have a vinyl that has a texture to it. So for example, I was using a vinyl that has tooling, and it looks, see if I can find a piece. I'm actually in my sewing room and I have so many different things. I can show you a piece, I think, similar to what I'm talking about. 1 second, please hold. Okay. So here goes, it's not quite like this, but this is an example of what I'm referring to. Can you see that vinyl and how it has a texture to it like that? So there's vinyl that also has like leather tooling, like when you carve leather, and it has tooling and it looks like leather. It's brown, looks like leather. This one has a texture. If you put that in a press where you have the two plates and you interface it, even if you cover this to protect it, it's going to flatten this raised part of the vinyl. So you're going to lose that raising. I also try not to iron those or put interfacing on those because the iron itself is heavy and can do the same thing. So that's what I will say. So I usually use a a flat vinyl, if I use a textured vinyl, I'm very careful about adhering any kind of interfacing to it because, like I said, even the weight of the iron can flatten that. And if you want that texture. So this actually, when my iron's hot, it adheres very quickly, all right, to it. I started here, it wasn't hot. So all you have to do is just keep spraying. I picked a big piece, so bear with me. And I get it nice and wet. Like I said, I turned off my steam because I don't want to affect the camera here. So I don't have steam, but you can steam it. Okay, it's nice and wet now. You can apply steam to this. And it actually goes on very quick. And then you would check the edges. Okay. So we're going to do this, and we're going to go all the way around our piece. Now, once I've done that, and I'm going to pretend like I've done the whole piece here, I just flip this over just like this. Make sure that I don't have any bubbles in there, right? I just flip it over, and then I will press again from the top to make sure, right? So this is the right side. Be careful about the edge of the glue. I do it on the wrong side first to make sure I can get all of these edges and I don't get any glue on my iron. So I know that those are already adhered. I can just simply do this. So here goes where the block fusing comes in. So now once I've done one piece, I can then just grab another piece. So I can grab, let's say, this piece, make sure it's right side up. Sorry. Yeah, in this case, this is the glue. So I'm going to put this wrong side down. So it should be right side up. So I should be able to see the nice, lovely print. And then you can actually get pretty close. I usually stay within 1/4 of an inch. There's a gap here. Once I've done that, I can actually lay this right over the gap. Because the fabric is raised up off of here, usually the glue will not stick to your iron. So I can actually do this, and then I block fuse. And so I do the same thing I did before. I just simply press and go all the way around. And I keep doing that until all my pieces have interface on it. Then I will come back and I will cut out these pieces. So I'm block fusing it. I'm only losing about this much between my pieces, but anything larger I can usually use to do what's known as Frankensteining or use it on the pocket. For example, you can use different pieces of interfacing put together on a pocket because nobody sees that. The reason that you don't use it maybe on the main body of a piece, those spare pieces of interfacing put together, is because if you do it on the main body of the piece, there are little seams. So you don't want that to be seen on your outside of your bag. So you will do that on the on a lining. So for those people who don't know what that is, if I take this piece here, and I'll get a pair of scissors. So let's say you have all these pieces of interface, right? And they look kind of like this, right? They're like kind of like a hot mess, right? And usually 2 inches is usually the most that I will keep. You don't have to throw these away. Once you have a pocket, you can then take your interfacing and just start piecing it together like a puzzle. It doesn't have to be perfect. I do overlap about 1/8 of an inch. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm actually putting the pieces together as a jigsaw puzzle. And then I'll get it. If some go over the edge, that's okay. And then I will cut it out. But then this is my pocket. And because it's on the inside of the bag, nobody can see that. But because I'm actually overlapping here, it's hard to see, but I'm overlapping this by 1/8 of an inch. That actually creates some thickness right here. So if it was on the outside of a bag and I flip this over, you potentially could see that right here there is a thickness. So it's not the best for the exterior of a bag. You can do this also for vinyl. So I could do it for a strap, for example, like this strap. I could take these scraps and just put it here and start interfacing my strap and then just cut it out. And the reason you can do it for a strap is because I can put it right next to each other. I don't have to overlap it in any way. And the vinyl itself is so stable, it won't matter. Okay. But that's it. And when you're interfacing this, same way that I did the other piece, I just lay the interfacing. I start with the first one where it's wrong side up, lay the interfacing, and then I interface. For vinyl, you're consistently going to have to interface them wrong side up. So if I have my interfacing and I have my straps, for example, or let's do the sides because the sides are the ones that I would be interfacing. I would take my sides. I would start with one. I would take my wrong side up, grab my interfacing, bumpy side towards the wrong side. So the glue towards the wrong side, line this up, and I would press, right? So I'd put my iron, I'd press, 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 press. Once I have this done, I would then take the second piece, slip it right next to it, still wrong side up. So vinyl can never be ironed right side up. It's always wrong side. Once this one's down, I just have a big piece of interfacing here. You can then fuse it like this, right? I can see right here, you can't see, but there's a seam right here. So I can see they're a good distance apart. So let me do those two just so that you can actually see what I'm doing. You actually get to see what happens. So vinyl is wrong side up, glue side down, right? So they're basically wrong side to wrong side. This should be smooth. It shouldn't have any glue. And then I'm going to press. Yes, you would use steam or you would use mist it with some water. And that just helps to melt the glue, right? Because when the water gets hot, it helps to melt the glue. So I'm going to do that. So unlike the cotton, when I turned it right side up and I said, oh, you could do this, you can't do that with vinyl because remember I said this will melt. The vinyl here will melt. You will feel this vinyl get soft. It will get soft, but once it cools down, it gets hard again. So now that I have this one piece on, I'm going to take the second piece that's here. Try to lay it on a cool part. This part's hot. Try to lay it on a cool part. Take this. You'll be able to see there's a gap or a space right here. I can see it. I'll show you when I turn it over and I'm done. But there is a gap between the two. I'm going to line them up. And then I'm going to interface the second piece. So I just do this. Once again, I'm pressing, not ironing. Somebody may explain it differently, but really it's just don't move the iron around. Don't move it around in a motion like you're ironing sheets. Okay. So now that I'm done with that, I can show you because it's adhered. I'm going to move this. I'm going to flip this over. I'm off camera, I know. But now you can see this was the gap that I was talking about earlier. That gap right in there. But you have to make sure that you iron these vinyl pieces from the back side. You can't iron them because you will melt this to your ironing. We don't want to do that. So when it comes to cutting out the pieces, I'm just going to rough cut it here. Only because it's so big. It's very big. So I don't really use scissors a lot. I have them, but I don't use them. But this is the piece. So now both pieces. So if you had like your bottom as well, right? You could then say, okay, well, I'm going to lay my bottom this way. And you keep doing it. These are the wasted little pieces that I have, right? So what you can do is you can use your scissor and you can cut it out. I actually use a ruler and a rotary cutter. That's usually what I use, but you can definitely use a scissor to do it. And like I said, I'm only cutting it once, whereas if you do it the other way, sometimes you end up cutting it twice because you have to trim. Okay, so that's all I did, and I trimmed it. If you want to, you can actually sit down and use a scissor if you're somebody who'd prefer to use the scissor because you want, to make sure that you don't mess anything up. You can definitely grab your scissor and cut it. If your scissors are sharp also, this one's easier. If your scissors are sharp, it actually follows the line. It actually follows the line of your piece. Okay, so you can use a scissor if you want. I don't use it. I use a rotary cutter and a ruler, but you can definitely cut it with a scissor. The interfacing is very easy to cut. So you would just clean those up, and that would be your side pieces. So that's preparing. Hey, you as well. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. Iris. It's so good to see you. Iris, long time. I miss you. A little bit of tear on this side. Um, Iris is an OG. So I don't know if everybody can see. I can see your comments, by the way. So whether you're in Facebook or on YouTube, this one's coming from Facebook. Before, when I had like Varna, she doesn't mind if I show her. This one's coming from YouTube, so I can see your comments. If you're on Facebook, you cannot see YouTube and vice versa, which is one of the reasons that I pop them up on the screen. So you don't think that I'm talking to myself on this side or I'm imagining things. There are people commenting from both places, and I appreciate it. So this is what this is the cutting, this is the preparation, this is talking a little bit about the interfacing. Day 2, which will be tomorrow evening, we will be putting together our exterior of our bag. So to be prepared for tomorrow, I just interfaced the sides and I talked about interfacing these pieces as well. You should have interfaced your side, so both of your sides, your front and your back, your bottom, your straps. Okay. I will leave, because I know it'll be a long day. I will leave this part here with the zipper for when we start the lining. So I'm just balancing the time. So tomorrow, what you need to prepare is your sides interface, your bottom interface, your front and your back, and your straps. And then we'll put it all together. We'll talk about how to fold this and get this done. And then we'll attach it. And then we'll be ready for the final day, which is the lining, and we'll do the zipper component as well. So that's it. I have been talking about, having things ready. And once again, I just want to reiterate, there are people who subscribe to my box, and because they subscribed, they got all of this material. So they got the fabric, the vinyl, the purse feet, the zipper, the interfacing, the Decoville. They got everything. They got the pattern. They got everything in the box. So I apologize if I'm losing anybody, but that's what happened. Yvette Barrett, stranger. Um, so that's, I don't mean to confuse anybody, but that's what I'm talking about. But if you're somebody who has the material and wants the pattern, you should be able to pick it up online. If you have any questions and you can't find it, you can always DM me. I'm on Facebook Messenger. You can DM me and I will point you in the right direction. I will also include the pattern once this is over at the bottom so everybody can see it. Oh, all the smiles, Miss Yvette. I hope everything is well with you. I know we haven't, but we need to connect, Yvette. If not before Christmas, before the new year. I took some time off, so we need to connect if you have time. Varna, you have a wonderful evening. Feel better, and I will talk to you. Okay, so we're back to the camera switching again. This is me. So preparing for tomorrow, it's the sides, the front, the back, and the bottom. Interface everything. We will just sew it together. You'll get to see me use a Teflon foot. And I'll talk a little bit more if there's any more tips. This bag, honestly, is a little bit on the thick side or the firm side because of the interfacing, but it's not a difficult bag. If you do not have vinyl, by all means, you can use and make it a all cotton bag for yourself. And that bag can be used. It's a totally usable bag. And then later on, when you get your hands on some vinyl, you can give it a try with vinyl. So good night, everybody. See you tomorrow and have a pleasant evening. Bye-bye.